This is the story of a man who tried with every ounce of his being to simply disappear. He went to incredible lengths to erase himself from the world, leaving behind a mystery that for almost 2 decades, police were sure was absolutely unsolvable. And you know what? For a long, long time, they were right.
So picture this. It's the fall of 2001. A man walks into a quiet motel in Washington state. He pays in cash, uses a fake name, and carries no ID whatsoever. He was, for all intents and purposes, a ghost. The question that haunted investigators for years was, who was he? Let's dive into the puzzle of the man who didn't want to be found.
Okay, so our story really begins at the Lake Quinault Inn, inside a single room that would hold its secrets for nearly 17 years.
He checked in on a Friday, just for one night. And then on Saturday, he extended his stay, but politely told them, no thank you to housekeeping. He did the same thing again on Sunday. The owner even saw him, just pacing outside, totally alone. And then, on Monday morning, nothing. Just silence. Now, what's so striking about the scene inside the room is just how precise it was. It was neat. The bed was made. The only things he left behind were a brand new, still in the package, toothbrush and toothpaste. It was almost as if he had followed a checklist to scrub every trace of himself from existence before he took that final step.
As investigators started digging, they quickly realized this wasn't just some tragic, random event. No, this was a man who had meticulously and deliberately erased his own path.
The few things he did leave behind were almost like taunts, just deepening the mystery. The name he used, Lyle Stevik, it led nowhere. The address he gave was for another motel, hundreds of miles away in Idaho. He left just enough cash on the nightstand to cover his bill, and in the trash can, a crumpled piece of paper with one single chilling word. And if you look at the 2 pieces of his handwriting, it really tells a story. On the motel registration card, his writing is kind of hasty, a mix of cursive and block letters. But on that note in the trash, the word suicide is in these precise, deliberate, all-caps letters. It's like seeing the difference between a fleeting thought and a final, irreversible decision. Physically, he was tall, about 6'2", but he was also alarmingly thin, maybe 140 pounds. The belt he was wearing, the last notch was worn out, which suggests he'd lost a lot of weight and fast. But other than that, he was well-groomed. He had an old scar from an appendectomy and a pretty rare genetic trait, attached earlobes. But none of it, not a single detail, got investigators any closer to a name.
You know, the original investigating officer, a guy named Lane Humans, was just haunted by this case. He said it was so unusual. Most people, they choose a place that means something to them. This man, he traveled to a remote town where nobody knew him, all to make sure he would remain a ghost.
For years, the case just sat there, cold. Lyle Stevik was just another name on a long list of John Does. But then, something pretty remarkable started to happen. The case found a whole new life, of all places, online.
A whole community of amateur internet detectives became completely fascinated by him, by this man who tried so hard to just disappear. They were drawn in by this tragic puzzle and, I think, a really deep sense of empathy, this feeling that somewhere out there had to be a family still waiting for a call that would never come. And, of course, the theories started flying. Given that this was just 3 days after the September 11th attacks, some wondered if there was a connection. Others thought maybe he was escaping a cult or running from the law. Maybe he was even in a witness protection program that had gone wrong. But every single theory just led to another dead end.
And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? This wasn't just about solving a brain teaser for them. This quote from one of the community's key members says it all. It was about this powerful human idea that he deserved to have his name back, and that his family, whoever they were, deserved to finally know what happened to him.
So after years of searching and ruling out literally hundreds of missing people, the community realized that the old ways just weren't going to cut it. It was time for a completely different approach, something that would change crime solving forever. Forensic genealogy was really their last best hope. Now, the science is super complex, but the idea behind it is actually pretty simple. You take a John Doe's DNA, you run it through public genealogy databases to find distant relatives, like third or fourth cousins, and then you build a family tree working backwards to pinpoint who they are. So with law enforcement's permission, this amazing nonprofit called the DNA Doe Project took on the case. And that very same online community that kept his story alive, they actually crowdfunded the expensive lab work.
Then, these incredible volunteer genealogists started the painstaking work of building his family tree from scratch, working backwards through generations and then forward again, until they finally zeroed in on one single family.
And let me tell you, this process was just staggering. I mean, at one point, just to figure out one branch of the family tree, the researchers had to identify and then rule out 88 different grandchildren. But they kept at it. And after months of this relentless work, they had a solid lead, a family in California who, years and years ago, had lost contact with their son.
And then, in the spring of 2018, it happened. The email that this community of complete strangers had been waiting for years finally arrived.
Lyle Stevik finally had a name. He was a 25-year-old man from Alameda County, California, and he had a family. A family who, even though they hadn't seen him in years, had always held on to this little sliver of hope that he was out there somewhere, just living his life.
His family, as you can imagine, was just immensely grateful. After almost 2 decades of that agonizing, not knowing feeling, they finally had an answer. They had closure. But they also made one very firm request, that his real name and their own identities be kept private, so they could finally grieve in peace.
And that's what we're left with, this really profound and difficult question. The man who called himself Lyle Stevik clearly, desperately wanted to be forgotten. But the community that found him did it out of compassion for the family he left behind. So in the end, was giving him his name back an act of kindness? Or was it a betrayal of his one final wish? It's a complex moral puzzle, and there's just no easy answer.